A lot to talk about this morning after a night of upsets in local races across Atlanta. Not only has Andre Dickens been declared the winner in the mayoral runoff, but we will soon have a new city council president and 6 new council members. Joining me to walk through all the changes here, 11 Alive political analyst Dr. Andra Gillespie with Emory. Thank you so much. Let's start with the mayor-elect. Many are surprised. You are not.
I'm not surprised. I mean, first of all, the polls were a statistical tie. But also just given the fact that a lot of the Dickens of support encompassed people who voted for him in the runoff, but then also were voting for other people on the first ballot, it looked like he was consolidating the vote. If there was anything that was surprising, I think it was the drop-off in support for Felicia Moore. So in absolute numbers, she got fewer votes yesterday than she got on November 2nd.
Sure.
And so while part of that is a function of lower voter turnout in general, I think we're going to be looking to see whether or not there were people who defected from her to support Dickens in the runoff.
It was quite a political journey. He won last night by 64% of the vote, which was absolutely dominant after just barely beating out Kasim Reed to get into the runoff when Felicia Moore had been dominant. So that flip, the script just absolutely flipped, and the key was turnout. You mentioned that the day after the November election. Let's talk more about the turnout.
Yeah, so I mean, overall turnout was low, which is not surprising for a runoff. You don't usually expect a runoff election to have higher turnout than the general election did. It falls off precipitously if we compare 2021 to 2017. And I think in part that's because the contrast between Moore and Dickens wasn't as stark as the contrast were between Bottoms and Norwood in 2017, or even Reed and Norwood in 2009. So I think what we're going to be looking at is to look to see where Moore lost support. One of the places where I do notice this is that as I go through the precinct numbers, Dickens was dominant in the south side of the city. He was getting upwards of 70, sometimes 80, 85% of the vote in some of those precincts. And while Moore was clearly the favorite, she was winning by margins of 60%, 65%, 70% in the northern districts that she was winning in. So that in part explains what's going on. I think what we also want to look at is to see whether or not people who could have supported her didn't show up yesterday.
Interesting. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms was a strong supporter of Mayor-elect Dickens. That's interesting to note. I want to talk about moving forward. Atlanta faces very, very significant issues. Rising crime is the one every poll says is most important for voters. Moving forward, what happens? Both Dickens and Moore talked about unity in the victory and concession speeches, even being willing to work together. There's a new city council president, 6 new members. What needs to happen from here, and how does this all come together in your view?
Well, I mean, I think one, we're not going to see any rancor in the transition, and I don't think there's going to be any rancor even as City Council President Moore exits her position and transitions over to Doug Shipman. Mayor-elect Dickens, is an engineer, and so what I expect that people are going to expect him to do is to use that engineer's brain to figure out creative ways to solve the extant problems that are facing the city. So we have to wait to see how he crafts a vision. We have to wait to see what his transition team looks like, and to see how quickly he can get his team on the ground and up and running to help govern.
Dr. Gillespie, always appreciate the time. We can find more, as always, on 11alive.com/election.